Good evening and welcome to Good evening and welcome to Transition Talks Tuesdays. My name is Tim Markle. I'm director of the Southern Regional Center for Children and Youth with Special Healthcare Needs. This Transition Talks Tuesdays is brought to you by Juneau and Adams County folks in partnership with Julie at New Lisbon High School. So we are excited for all of their help and support. And tonight we are going to talk about higher education options. What do I need to know? We know that some of our students want to go to school after high school, but should they choose a four-year college, two-year college, a tech college? How can they get the supports that they need? Because we know IDEA does not follow them to college. So come and we're hoping to talk about what some of those options are and supports if a student wants to go to college. We are really excited to have Kris Follansbee from Western Technical College and Coppess from UW-La Crosse. So very excited to have them, and I'm just going to turn it over to you guys, and I'm going to go back to taking attendance.
Wonderful. Well, hello, everybody. I am Kris. I am the Manager of Access Services at Western. I am very happy to be here tonight. I will let Kris introduce himself.
And hi, my name is Kris Coppess, and I work at the University of Wisconsin-LaCrosse. And in the Access at the Access Center. Currently, I am an advisor in this department, and I work with alternative media and advising students on for the classes and technology.
Perfect. All right, so we'll get started with our presentation. Kris and I are going to just kind of both use the same presentation and just chime in when we have differences. Obviously, there are a few differences between the university and technical college as far as documentation. Most of the accommodations are pretty similar, but a few differences. So we will talk about those. But the majority of our presentation, we really do the same things at UWL and at Western. So really happy to be working together with Kris. All right. I will share my screen.
I just want to remind people that please use the chat box. We will be monitoring the chat and you can ask questions through there, or you can unmute and we'll see that you unmute and you can ask questions that way. So I think Kris and Kris are going to be able to handle questions throughout. If I interrupt them and they say don't interrupt me, then I know that they cannot. And then we'll just hold questions to the end after that. Back to you, Kris.
We could definitely answer questions as we are going. This is a pretty laid back presentation on my part, and I'm sure on Kris's as well. So, all right, with that, we'll get started. So as Kris mentioned, that is Access Center at UWL and Access Services at Western. We like to keep things similar. All right, so part of the things, like what do we do? Basic information that we do, just promoting equal access and educational opportunities for students with disabilities, just like you get in high school. We want to provide the same that you get in high school as you're transitioning into college, with a few different caveats for different accommodations. So we will serve any student with a documented disability, and we coordinate the academic accommodations with students, instructors, for students with disabilities. So we will work with your instructors by first meeting with you and then sending stuff to the instructors. And I'm not sure if they do it differently at UWL, but the way we do it at Western is we send out letters through AIM. I think it's the same at UWL, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Kris? But
yeah, so we do the exact same thing in regards to after we make the accommodations, we send a letter out to the faculty member and the student. We send it out to the student so that they know that the faculty member has gotten the accommodation letter that lists all the accommodations that they have or that have been approved, and that that there is one area of testing that we do it a little bit different in our locations. On our hands, what we do at UWL is we send this out to the faculty and the students. Then the student needs to meet with the instructor to complete a testing agreement with the instructor. If they just kind of find out if they're going to be testing with the instructor or they're going to test in our space. If they test in our space, then they need to complete a testing agreement with the professor. Basically, it's instructions on how to proctor their exam. And I think for Kris at Western, is that you send that, when you send that letter out to the instructor, that the instructor automatically sends you back how they want their exams to be proctored. Is that correct?
Yes. One of the really nice things about UWL and Western is we have the same software system. It's called AIM. And in this, students, it's kind of, they have their own portal. They are able to fill out the application as soon as they do that at either Access Services or at the Access Center. That one's a tough one, Chris. They will then have what's called their own student portal. And in that, they will have their application, their documentation will be stored, and on there, they are also able to go in and sign up for testing. So it's really nice that the similarities between both UWL and Western for students, in case they're doing any of the 2+2s that we offer with UWL. But
and a side note, each portal is what does I want to say, is actually, ours is for our students, and the portal for Western is there for their students. So we can't see their students and they can't see our students. It's all confidential. So, but we just use the same database that helps us collect data and communicate accommodations to the students and faculty, and do notices and keep track of accommodations.
good point. Yes, definitely separate. Okay, and then the other thing that we do is coordinate access to other campus resources. There's a lot of extracurricular things that happen at UWL or at Western that we will make sure there are accommodations for. Say if that's a sign language interpreter for different events, that is something that we would each coordinate with the request from students.
Yeah, the other thing too is I always consider our services that we're kind of like the old time switchboard that you think of, where you plug in the different listeners to, with different resources. Because what we do is we plug in the student with let's say different services on campus. It might be counseling and testing. It might be a TRIO program for tutoring, or it might be records and registration for things about their record, or financial aid. So, what we do is we get those students, if they have questions, and we can redirect them to areas that it's their specialty area.
Nice, yes. So I think common accommodations, as I said, for both of us, the biggest one at Western is testing. That would include reduced distraction environment, extended time, alternative formatting. There's a lot of different things that could go along with that. Low lighting, if you need to have a scribe. So these are all of the accommodations are going to be on an individualized basis. So it's going to be dependent on the conversations that you have with either the advisors at UWL or myself or our specialist at Western. That during that intake meeting, this is where you'll find out which accommodations you are eligible for. And some of the other accommodations, alternative formats. So a lot of the things that the students are already getting at the K-12 setting, electronic books, large print, Kurzweil. A couple of the different softwares that we have at Western are ReadSpeaker and Ally. So when everything went pretty much into shutdown mode during COVID, I was scrambling to try to find different accommodations and alternative formats that would help students, because students that had been in face-to-face classes are now in online classes where there is print heavy material to be done. So there's a lot of reading that was happening. So I purchased ReadSpeaker, which is actually on our Blackboard shell, and it is for any student. You don't have to be a student with a disability. So anything on Blackboard can be read to students. And this can help in so many ways, but our students with disabilities are also able to use that when they take exams. That's how we do the reading portion of an accommodation. So if a student is normally in high school, have somebody read tests to them, when they come to Western, we no longer sit down with students and read to them. we will have them use ReadSpeaker. And then Ally is another alternative format that we use, and that is also on Blackboard, which is on every single document. How, depending on how good the instructor puts their document out there, there's a lot of different formats that students can use to either read that, listen to it, but there's HTML, audio, lots of different formats that they can use. Kris, anything you want to add?
And at UW-Well, we have a license for Kurzweil 3000. And Kurzweil, what that will do is when we do alternative formats for, let's say, textbooks, it's a little bit different here because we have a textbook rental program. So the university already purchases all the textbooks for the undergraduate students. Graduate students have to purchase their own. So we already own the books. So a lot of times it's very easy for us to get the electronic books in a format. So Kurzweil, what that does is we provide it in that format to the student. In the Kurzweil program will read the textbook to the student. Also, we use Kurzweil for testing. We convert the exam into a Kurzweil format, and then it reads the exam to them. When it comes to online, we use the Kurzweil browser to be able to read online articles and things like that. Overall, that's how we've handled that accommodation.
Perfect. Yeah, and we have a different at Western because we don't have a textbook rental. So students are responsible for purchasing all of their books. I know one of the big initiatives that's been gaining a lot more momentum these last few years is OER, which is the Open Educational Resources. So they're trying to get a lot more books to be much more accessible to students, which is really nice. So the ones that aren't available on OER, what we do is we use CaptiVoice, and that will be an account that a student will have. All of their textbooks will be listed all on their own account. So then they can use that on the web, or if they have their phone, they can open up an app on CaptiVoice, and then all of their books will be there for them. Okay, next one, classroom recording and note-taking. So Western and UW-L both have smart pens. They have been a little bit harder to come by. I'm not sure if any of the high schools have them. I know that some of them in La Crosse have tried out smart pens. That is a nice note-taking system for students who are pretty confident in taking their own notes, but they just maybe can't keep up with the note taker or taking notes if their teacher is talking fast, or different reasons why they would want to have it, but it records the lecture while they're taking notes, which is really nice. And then audio note taker. So that is something more that, Kris, I think you guys have had experience with that one. We don't have that yet at Western.
Yeah, audio note taker. Well, one thing with a smart pen too is it's a special paper that students use that is from that they're sold by Smart Pen basically. And what it also does is it digitizes their notes, so they can also actually play it on their computer and listen to it at the same time, and then go back and edit. And I think a lot of times with a smart pen, where this really shines is when it comes into mathematics, statistics, chemistry, biology, when there's a lot more things that need to be drawn. And it works really well. Audio note taker, actually that has changed, is changing. It's currently, I don't think available for sale anymore, but it's being kind of phased out. And the replacement is called Glean. And it's the two products are made by Sonneson, and they're just kind of transitioning to Glean. But basically they're the same. What you can do is at a university level, a lot of instructors provide PowerPoints for their classroom lectures. So what you're able to do with both Glean and Audio Note Taker is you're able to get them ahead of time and bring them into your recording. And what it does is you can load it's a software on your computer, and you can load in the actual slides of the presentation. You hit record, and then it records. It does not transcribe, but it records the lecture. And then, and what you can do is type. So if you're a student that it's easier for your type to type versus handwrite, that's where that works really well. As they're moving towards Glean, what it is nice about that product is that it's a audio recording app on your phone that also synchronizes with your computer too, because everything will go, the recording will go up to the cloud, and then you can open it up with a different device, or vice versa. You might be in class, you can bring in your PowerPoints and do the typing as you're going and recording, and then later on you can go back with your phone and re-listen to the recording. So it works a little bit differently. So.
Perfect. Okay. And then personal note take or recorder. So that would be if you wanted to record something on your own. I don't have a lot of students doing that at Western. I'm not sure if they do that much at UW-L, but it's what it sounds like. And then note takers, this is probably one of the bigger things that we use at Western still, is we have peer note takers. So it would be somebody in the classroom with the student, and then they are paid actually to take notes. So we do expect them to be good notes. And then what they'll do, they'll go to class, they'll take notes just like they would for themselves, and then they email them to the students, which it's a nice support, I guess, for students, but I always encourage students to continue to take their own notes, because research does show that students learn a lot better when they take their own notes. Do you guys do a lot of, I think yours are stipend? Or?
At UW-L, we have fewer note takers. Our note takers are volunteers. And before all this new technology came out with smart pens and things, and we heavily relied on our volunteer note takers. And we had no problem, but it's so interesting when it comes to this fact is that when a student will go to different colleges in the system, some institutions pay note takers, some institutions don't, and they work on a voluntary basis. And it's like in our office, I would love to pay note takers, but it seems like it could never be done. But even within our own UW system, we have other places actually paying note takers. It's the craziest thing.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of how things that shake out at universities and community colleges and the like.
Yep. Different everywhere. That's what keeps things interesting, I guess. Okay. So some of the accommodations that are not as appropriate at college, or that you will not see as often in a college that you do at the high school level, is unlimited test taking time. So this will all be dependent on this meeting that we had talked about earlier, the intake meeting, and the documentation, the disability that the student has. Extended time to complete assignments, use of notes, books, other resources during testing. This would only happen at Western if all of the students were allowed to use notes on the test. Permission to retake tests, modified exams or assignments. So kind of what they always say is you cannot have a fundamental alteration of a class or how it is delivered. That is the main, I think, thing that every college and university looks at, is that the students have to be able to handle the same rigor of the class as other students, that they can just have accommodations then to help level the playing field.
Exactly.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So some of the differences between K-12 and college, and I need to, my mouse is like disappearing on me. Whoa, sorry. Previous. I have, our faces are in the way right now. There we go. Okay. So high school is the IDEA, which Tim talked about at the very beginning, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And in high school, once a student is diagnosed, the student must receive services. Parents can receive information. It's very common for parents to be very involved in students' education at the high school. And it's very common for them to initiate communication with the instructors. IDEA is very focused on academic success of the student. In college, however, we use the Americans with Disabilities and the Americans with Disabilities Amendment Act of 2008. Students are now the one that is required to come forward and disclose that they have a disability. So it is their right to do that or not to do that. Parents cannot receive information about their child because of FERPA, so they must have a signed consent form. I've had student or parents call me asking about students and how they're doing, but if they don't have a signed release, I can't give out that information. And I know some parents have been very upset about that because they're paying for the school for their child or they're paying for the classes, but it's still because their child is now 18, that is something that I cannot do unless there is a signed release. And students must initiate communication with the faculty. This is something that at Western we will do on behalf of students. We will talk with instructors and be that go-between. I'm not sure if
we do that. We do the same thing, is that we, certain students might need some, additional appointments to meet with us.
Right.
It might need to, and we might need to initiate let's say, a meeting with a professor to talk about things that's just not going to be clearly communicated, maybe through the email that is generally sent. The other law that applies is Section 504 of the Section 504, and I think the other thing too is, like, when I'm listening, we have the same things happen with parents calling us wanting more information about their student. I always tell them I can't give you any information, but if you have a concern of your student, if there's a concern you have for your student, you can tell me, and I can maybe email to see how things are going just out of the blue.
yeah.
and just to kind of make that a personal contact.
Nice. Yes. So I think the biggest difference is the ADA and ADAA, they're focused on equal access. So just because you get accommodations, it does not guarantee that you will be successful. No college student is guaranteed their success. And also a student with a disability, even with accommodations, you're not guaranteed success, but you are hopefully guaranteed that equal access, that you will have, the term you always hear is a level playing field. So it's good to use your accommodations in college. Do that, get signed up. One big thing that I always want students to know is, even if you don't think you want to use accommodations, get signed up right away if you have an IEP 504 plan in high school, because then you can use those accommodations from that day forward. But if you're not doing well in your classes and you're like, oh, I really should have probably signed up with Kris or Kris, and now you want to come in and get signed up, we cannot go back. Accommodations are not retroactive. So we start accommodations on the day that you come and sign up with us, and we get those accommodations set up. So it's a good thing for students to know. Yep.
Exactly. And the thing that I think we both would want to emphasize is contacting the office with a head enough lead time, because sometimes it does take time to get that the documentation that we need from the provider or from the school. And so by having that already done before school starts or the classes start, and it's up to the student if they want to use the accommodations. But if, let's say, after the first exam, they say, ooh, I better use that extra time, then it's better to have it in place so that we can flip the switch and email the rest of the instructors for that second exam. Otherwise, you can get a cascading effect where the student is just off to a bad start. So we want to prevent that.
Perfect. All right, so now we're on to documentation. High school students mostly get an IEP or a 504 plan, and the school is responsible for evaluation, and it does not cost anything for the students. So the best thing I always want students to know if I meet with them when they're still in high school is make sure you have an updated IEP or 504 plan, because that is something that will carry on with you. You don't have to pay for that. But say you don't want to go to school right away, but you never know. And then the older that documentation gets, the more issues you may have using it. I know there are some colleges and universities that are very strict on a 5-year window, looking at, they won't, use documentation that's older than 5 years. I will at Western. We do, we have a little bit more flexibility with our documentation, I think, than other universities. Kris, is that?
It's pretty close to that. I would say that in high school in your junior and senior year, yeah, if you have the opportunity to get your reevaluated as a student, do it, because it's nice to work with the most recent 3-year reevaluation, because that's what we request from the families. We don't request the IEP or the 504. They make great, I feel like that they make great background information, but we like to see the last 3 reevaluation. When it comes to the age of it, well, I've taken some old documentation too. It's not guaranteed. Some colleges are very on point when it comes to no more than X years or 4 years. I look at the quality of the documentation at its foundation, because you can get documentation that just doesn't really give you very much. And what I want to do is to glean more information out of that as I can.
Perfect.
Because what we do is what's a little bit different for what at UW-La is that we have students also in programs going to get their GREs or going to get their master's degrees or something of that nature, or teaching degrees and things. So I know the next step that they'll need is they'll need to have they'll need to go and get a GRE or something like that, which is like high stakes standardized exams through ETS. And they're of all the places out, all the requirements out there, they're the ones with the highest standards. So if there's a student that needs that, I'd rather, we have ways on campus that we can say, okay, maybe you might need to get retested and to get adult normed testing, let's say for LD or something of this nature. And so that when you do go to do your graduate program, that this documentation will be able to, so that you'll be able to have extra timer in the GREs, and things of this nature. So we have some ways to do that. But no matter what, if there's a student that came to the university that maybe we needed more documentation, or they just really didn't have the documentation that came to the standard, a lot of times what we do is we grant provisional accommodations until we're able to attain the documentation we need, or at least a year. At that point, not all 4 years.
Yeah, temporary accommodations are nice, because especially during the pandemic, it was hard for students to get documentation if they did not already have it. So that's a good point.
And we want to see students succeed, and we
Right.
don't want them to go with, especially if it's very evident that this is something that they do need. This is a way for us to be able to bridge that gap.
Yes. All right. So documentation in general, I think we've talked quite a bit about it. So just a real general overview is what it needs to have for sure is a diagnosis, symptoms, the functional limitations. How does this affect you in the classes? That is what I like to know. It's like the barriers that you are experiencing because of your disability. How do accommodations help you? And that's a conversation that you'll have with, like I said, with either the advisor or myself or the specialist at Western. And then recommendations by your provider. So if this is not your IEP or your 504 plan, if this is something from your treating physician, your psychologist, these would be the documentation requirements that we would require, and then letterhead signed by a provider. Anything
At UWL, what we do is we have verification forms that are broke down by like disability group, like, you know, so each form for each group has specific questions that are basically derived from what Kris has on the screen there. And so it's a lot easier because a lot of times, you know, students, you know, they might not be diagnosed through school. They might be diagnosed through their provider, like especially with ADHD and other mental health conditions. So so it's nice to be able to rely on these kind of verification forms, because especially if it's an MD, they have less time to write a letter nowadays than they have ever had. And so these verification forms help them and guide them through what we're asking for.
Right. Currently, the one that we have at Western is a disability verification form, just a generalized one. And then the provider writes down what the diagnosis is. And so that's something that we're probably going to be changing at Western. We'll see. All right. So documentation continued. Same stuff, letter from a provider, doctor, psychologist, provider notes from the medical records, evaluation report from school district, or verification forms. And those are the ones that Kris was just talking about that are on the Access Center website. And then once a student sends in their application for us, we do send an email back to that student, and there is a link to our disability verification form if they don't have documentation submitted. And then this is just another reminder that IEPs and 504 plans are not acceptable forms of documentation for UWL. They do require the evaluation, but they are an acceptable form of documentation from Western.
Yeah, and I like to state that it's the last 3-year reevaluation that the school has done. And, you know, parents and students can fax their documentation in, they can mail it, they can email it. We just need to be able to get it or upload it through our database when they identify to our office.
Yep, same with Western. Good point. All right, so student responsibilities in college. The first thing you need to do is register with either the Access Center, Access Services, or whichever school you're going to. Find the Disability Services office and get registered with them, and then provide the documentation. And that's when you will sit down with somebody from the Disability Services office and you will write that accommodation plan. So the biggest thing to know is to be a good self-advocate for yourself. You have to, as a student, you have to know, I feel, what your disability is and what is going to help you to be successful. College it's an extension of your high school experience, but it's something that I think a lot of students, they're afraid of it, but then when they get there, it's like, that's what you want to do. So I think that it's a lot better experience for a lot of students. So making sure that you get the accommodations that you are eligible for so that you can be successful is so important.
Also, self-advocacy means when you're in the classes is that you after you have class, and if you have questions, contact the professor, go to their office hours, reach out for tutoring services, because there's different resources on campus. And if you don't know them, come and talk to us about resources, because that's self-advocacy too, because we want to be able to have you help you out with your own success, but we need to know if there is any issues that are going on that we might be able to help.
Such a great point. Yep.
We do have some questions in the chat.
Perfect.
So what happens if a school waives the 3-year evaluations all the way through high school, which they shouldn't do? But this is a large conversation about when and what should be on the last evaluation, and also how old the testing can be. And what are you talking about when you say testing? IQ and academic testing, or the special education evaluation assessments? What are you looking for?
I would say that it all depends on the disability. when it comes to, let's say, LD, having the Woodcock-Johnson and the full battery of psychological assessments. You know, when it comes to, it depends on what kind of disability it is. Because, you know, if it was more of a mental health type of disability, that a lot of times can be provided through the healthcare provider. So it really, again, depends on the disability itself. And yeah, so there's always those cases of school districts or parents waiving that 3-year reevaluation. But I guess provide the one that's the most recent, and that if that is in elementary school, well, it might be enough to get a provisional until for the first semester or two on campus at UW-La. And what we would do in that case is I wasn't sure to add this, but on our campus, we have the school psych program. And so what they do is they provide very inexpensive testing, like $350 for a full psychological evaluation. And so the students in that program give the batteries, and then like Dr. Dixon, he would do the write-up, and then all those batteries are adult normed. Then they're really set up for having their documentation as an adult, and so that really does help. But no matter what, I would like to, even if they've been waiving these for the last few years, hey, I would still encourage families and parents to request them, because it only helps the student.
Yeah, that was going to be my comment. Is I would fight to get that last evaluation, that junior or senior year. I think that, your student is eligible, your child is eligible for that. And I think that is something that every school district should be doing for that student. So.
And that is something that the schools should be able to plan ahead on, seeing as how they are considering transitions starting at age 14. And so are already talking about this plan of, is it going to be higher education? In what form? Is it going to be a technical school? Is it going to be an apprenticeship? Is it going to be, or is this the student not thinking about going on to higher education? So that, knowing that evaluation is an important part of higher education disability determination, then the school should consider themselves responsible for making sure that there is a current evaluation before that kiddo goes on to higher education. And it also sounds to me that both of you are very open, your offices are very open to, a student or a family calling when they're in high school to say, okay, what sort of evaluation, what sort of testing am I going to need because I want to go to your school? And that you guys would be able to talk to them about their disability and be able to make sure that they have the correct documentation, the correct testing done, so that they can have the maximum help. Are both of your colleges open to that?
Definitely. Yes. I have attended many IEPs, actually. I've been invited to IEPs of students who know for sure that they are coming to Western. I have attended those IEPs, and that is something that we talk about at that time.
And, the also too, as those, when it comes to accommodations, if it's a really kind of, not out of the ordinary, but I'll just use more, infrequent accommodation that could fundamentally alter a class. Well, we can't allow an accommodation to fundamentally alter a class. A good example would be, I had a student that wanted to have his exams open notes. Well, if I had bad documentation, I would just say, I can't make the decision based on the documentation that you provided me. But like for this student, I looked at the documentation. I said, well, unfortunately, that request is not supported by the documentation because those batteries aren't, it's not significant enough where I should be able to consider this as an accommodation. So it can get kind of very specific. But that's but a lot of times when it comes to just kind of very typical types of accommodations, like extra time on an exam, quiet space, maybe alternative media, think something of this nature. We can look at the documentation and or the student's previous history. So, would you add anything else to that, Kris?
No, I think you covered it.
Julie, did you want to go ahead and ask your question, or would you like me to read it?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. This is actually for people who have children with emotional behavior disabilities. And what kinds of services, if any, do you provide for individuals strictly with EBD and not a specific learning disability?
It's going to be very dependent on each student, what kind of accommodations they had in the past, what kind of things that they're looking for. There are accommodations that they would have gotten in school, or if they would have had, like, depending on the level of the EBD, do they have somebody that goes with them to each class? So that would be something that is not an accommodation at a technical college or a university. That would be like a care attendant, but that is something that could be allowed in if that is a necessary thing for that student to be able to go to school, but that's not something that would be covered by either Western, I'm assuming, or by UWL.
Correct. I see like attendant. I've had students using attendant care that have high spinal cord injuries, and that the student is the one that hires their own attendant.
Yep, we've had a
That's
student with autism that has had an attendant come along with that student, and the student was very successful at Western. But those would probably be, I would think them, I'm trying to think of other accommodations that we would provide. And the student is, again, needs to be able to handle the rigor of the course, and the behaviors have to be, I'm totally blanking on the word that I'm trying to find right now.
Acceptable in a class.
In a classroom, correct, yes. So it would, I think that's going to be a conversation that's going to be so individualized. That would be something that they would want to just come and find out. Julie, do you have any specific example?
So actually, how it's been directed to me in the past is that when it comes to ADA, there is very little accommodation available for individuals with emotional behavior disabilities. And that's more of an idea law. And I just wanted to make it aware. I'm well aware. I just want to make it aware for other people who may not know this. And if I can just interject one more thing, going back to the discussion about the 3-year re-eval, and one of the things that I really do is I don't care if they haven't had an evaluation or not. When they're a sophomore, junior, senior, my students automatically get a 3-year re-evaluation, just because a lot of colleges, a lot of agencies and such want the most recent, they call it, preferably the last year of testing information, but we'll go back to the last 3 years. So, if you're a parent of a child with a disability and the school's saying, we don't really need to do it, and you're looking at college or anything, even agency support, whatever, push it.
Yep.
That, I advocate for that big time. The other thing is for those who are working with DVR, I usually advocate, I always advocate for my seniors who plan to go to college when they are juniors and we're meeting with DVR, that DVR provide an assistive technology assessment done during their senior year to help them prepare to get whatever technology they need to survive in college. And that's great, Kris, that you participate in IEP meetings. It doesn't even have to be an IEP meeting. It would be great to have the college representative, the DVR especially, and discuss what things may be needed, or what, you know, it could be programs. DVR can help pay for programs.
Books.
Let me rephrase that. Books, or even like I had a student in graphic design and DVR paid for all the software needed for the classes that student needed to have, but also made sure communication was made, what specific computer would be best for the classes he was taking, what software, what, you know, there was a lot of preparation that we needed to do for this student to be successful. He ended up transferring from Western after he graduated to Stout and graduated with a 4-year degree. So it's just really critical to have that team meeting with all these outside people. And I'm sorry I sucked up time. I'm done talking.
No, you did a great job.
Yeah.
Hey, the other thing I'm gonna circle back on one thing about EBD. Remember when I said about there's some times that we meet with students more frequently than others? Well, that would be one. And then at the beginning of the semester, my colleague Jennifer, what she does is she meets with the instructors and the student, and they explain a little bit more, and so they understand that student, that they just don't show up in class and then have interruptions and things like that, and set ground rules, you know. The other thing that is not in this presentation on accommodations is something that there are housing accommodations too. So let's say if your student is going to a 4-year college, and so in Wisconsin, they would be required as a freshman to be in the dorms. So accommodations for dorms could be a single room, or it could be going from a triple to a double, or something like that. Or they need to make a request to bring an emotional support animal to the dorms. So emotional support animals can be in the dorms. They just can't accompany the student to class. Only service animals can accompany an individual to a class. So those are some distinctions that can be made, but also there's a lot there when it comes to housing accommodations that can be made. But so that would be, again, when you as a student or a parent helping your student, go in and fill out those intake forms on our websites and you just are identifying to our office for the first time, you'll have the opportunity to write in those accommodations that you think your student needs, or that they've used in the past, or request housing accommodations. There is on our campus, there's a formal way of doing it, but having that on there in addition helps us to coordinate things.
Julie, you made a lot of really good points. I just wanted to really quickly talk about the technology support to get that assessment. That has been really, really helpful for a lot of students coming from K-12 to find out what kind of technology they would be really good at. I work pretty closely with the person who does the technology assessments in La Crosse area, and he will connect with me and I'll connect with them. You know, we'll talk about the different accommodations or technology that they think that the student would benefit from. So really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. And then the same as UWL. As you know, Julie, we meet weekly with our students who come in. If it is a student who has a lot higher need, or the transition is going to be a lot more challenging. So that's something that we can always do. So again, it's kind of individualized. I know we're really getting close on time here. So we'll just really quickly go over this, because I think we've talked about all of this already, and it's been up on the screen for a while. So I'm sure you've had the opportunity to read it, but really understanding your disability and how it impacts you, making sure you get that disability documentation, reducing or eliminate current accommodations that won't be approved in college. I know a lot of high school kids come and they have the accommodation of testing where 2 of the 4 questions or answers are taken away. Don't do that. Stop doing that. You start that in your high school year, sure. Sophomore, maybe start kind of weaning that off, but by their senior year, make sure the tests that the other students are taking are the same tests that your student is taking, because that will help them to be much more successful in college. All right, let's go to the next. So how to request accommodations. It's the same at UWL and Western. We both have, like I said, that AIM software system. So you would go to Access Center or Access Services and click on the apply for accommodations. And then it's a pretty simple process for both of ours. And then you can upload your documentation right at that time. And if you don't have it, then you can, like Kris said earlier, email it, send it in, walk it in, whatever works best for you. And then you'll meet with one of them or one of us. And then your journey will begin. So that is the end of our presentation. There's our contact information. I'll leave it up for a second, but do we have any more questions?
I do want to comment that ironically, I've kind of kept track because I do 1-year follow-ups and everything, and I do keep in frequent touch with former students. And the students who, and I have to say this with Western because I know you do this, the students who met with Christina and Christina before you, Christina, on a weekly basis graduated. So they scheduled it. I did document it on here as in the chat, but they scheduled a meeting, same time, same day of the week with Christina, like it was a regularly scheduled class. And those are the ones who ended up graduating. So there's something there, it works, and to take advantage of that. So that's my spiel. You guys were awesome tonight. Thank you so much.
Definitely.
I too want to thank you guys so much, and I apologize for putting fake links into the chat box, but the real link for the feedback survey is now there. So please feel free to do that. I will also be compiling the links as well as looking at the PowerPoint, and any other links that could be useful will be onto a resource sheet, which I will send everybody. Kris and Chris said that they will get me their PowerPoint, so I will PDF that sucker and get that sent out to you as well. So thank you all so much for being here tonight. I will let you know when the recording is available, Kris. And Kris, you know how much I am thankful that you guys were actually here tonight. So I really do appreciate it. And hopefully we'll be able to do this again, because this is some really great information. Thanks a lot. Have a great night.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.